Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, June 9th, 2026. Time for yet another show. And I want to check in with everybody who's listening, both live and via podcast, about the sound levels. I still am tinkering with things, and I guess I need to get Greg's opinion on the balance between us again and whether we've got that right again post-trip. Oh, and I didn't, but now I'm looking at the Ethernet wire that I've connected here and I'm not using. And all right, probably best that we experiment that with that on another day. Anyway, maybe I'll get an agreement with Justice to be listening carefully during previews, perhaps at some point soon, and then we'll know before we go on here. Anyway. Yes. What the hell was I going to tell you about? I can't even remember anymore. Yes. Well, we want to get the sound levels right. And Scott still says, I think, every once in a while that my levels are just, I don't know. I'm not certain what it is, whether we stream at a different volume or the podcast comes across at a different volume. Here in-house in the editing suite, that is the upstairs of the world headquarters here, I don't know. The sound is booming. You know, but we're listening on headphones on our own editing equipment, and I keep backing off of it because it sounds so loud, but I guess it's just not. Well, turn your sound up and for the next 2 hours, and then quickly remember to turn it back down again. First of all, you shouldn't be listening to anything else. But second of all, you'll blow your ears out if you've turned the sound up to hear me by my tinny little voice, I guess, squeaking through the speakers. And then everybody else who super boosts their sound, or gets it right anyway. I don't know. It's difficult enough to do the show without having to worry about the sound levels, but we are here. If you're here and I'm here, then that makes it our time, and we better use our time better than this, quite honestly. Okay, so everything Trump touches dies. Greg was 100% right. Donald Trump shows up at the Knicks and snaps their winning streak, which I guess they've been on since like April whatever. They haven't lost the game for quite a while, and it was an extraordinary streak, and I don't know what it was because I don't watch any of it. But it sounded like it was really good. But, I mean, it was actually quite long, and what was it? Let's see. Some of you may know offhand, but the Knicks winning streak, here's me tapping those words out into the 13-game playoff win streak, but they may have also had the Knicks run was the second longest winning streak in NBA postseason history prior to the defeat at Madison Square Garden, in case you hadn't guessed that's what this was about. New York's previous loss occurred more than a month prior on April 23rd, 2026. So we were still, probably still westbound on our big adventure across the country the last time the Knicks lost. So we just should have kept traveling. But if you'd prefer, you can blame it on Donald Trump. And it is a little bit weird that, of course, he shows up and kind of squashes all of the very palpable street energy going on in New York around the playoffs, and tamps down on because of his quote unquote safety insistence, right? I have to have security when I go there. And they closed down blocks and blocks around Madison Square Garden, and you couldn't get there, and you had to get there 2 hours early and go through TSA-style screening, apparently, in order to get into the place. And what a downer just to have to get in there and sit and wait. Although, it could have been something of a party if it wasn't him. Of course, you wouldn't have to go in 2 hours early. But if it wasn't for the fact that he was coming, and putting everybody through this trouble, they might have had a party for 2 hours before tip-off. Anyway, everybody was annoyed by this whole thing, and as I understood it, you couldn't even approach. I don't understand how it would work, but it looked like they were saying they were closing it down to traffic, of course, but then they were saying also no pedestrian traffic is allowed around Madison Square Garden. Like, how do you get to Madison Square Garden to go to the game? I don't really know how they made that work, or if they made that work. I also did see some video circulating this morning of Jared Kushner happily, waving police aside at a security gate and saying, "Out of my way, I'm Jared Kushner. I'm going to the game with one of my kids," and then waving to the crowd and to the police officers on his way in. So, I'm sure that sent a great message. Anyway, Trump showed up. I believe the verbiage used in the headlines and pool reports that I saw was that he was thunderously booed when he was briefly shown on screen on the Jumbotron during the national anthem. And I guess it was such an intense reaction that they cut away from him very quickly. I also did find, I don't know why this interests me so much, but I saw that the pool report for, the White House pool reporters' coverage of what was going on was that Trump was, during the national anthem, standing with his hand over his heart. And one, heart, yeah, it's a good question. Two, I don't know. I haven't seen any pictures of it. I don't doubt that could have happened. I mean, why not? But what I'm saying is I saw a lot of pictures of him from that, and there are some where he's standing with his hands at his sides. That's, whereas, of course, everybody else in the private box with him had their hand over their heart. And then he went to a salute of sorts, which, questionable in terms of not in uniform and flag code, et cetera, but I'm sure he believes Commander-in-Chief, you're supposed to salute something. Of course, he also salutes North Korean generals, so don't get too excited if you're the American flag, thinking he really respects you and you're different. Anyway, but I didn't see any hand over the heart thing, and I was a little bit curious. I saw him, hands at sides, hands at salute, hands stuffing what I'm told were French fries into his mouth, but nothing else. And then, of course, as everybody anticipated, he fell asleep during the game. So the game everybody else was so excited to see, but they were pissed off that they had to share with Donald Trump, and he just slept right through it. Hottest ticket in town. But whatever. Anyway, and then as soon as the game was over, motorcade out of there. And the boos outside were even louder. So I don't know. I don't know whether the television stations covering the game tried to mute it a little bit or cut away from him or what. But there you have it. That's the story. San Antonio Spurs defeat the New York Knicks 115-111 in Game 3. Word is we're still awaiting word on whether or not Donald Trump is going to order Game 4 to be played at his house and see how quickly they can put up a basketball court in or around the White House. It was a good point, I think, last night about all of the security. Sanho Tree making the observation, that Trump was absolutely surrounded by thousands of people who detested every fiber of his being, and yet he magically survived the ordeal without a golden armored ballroom. That is amazing. And it's a good observation and quite true. I suppose you can actually keep the President of the United States, whoever it may be, relatively safe even without drone ports, whatever that's supposed to be, and sniper ports, whatever those are supposed to be. And what can I tell you? We've made that discovery in the last 24 hours or so. All right. Let's see. Other things happening today, of course. The Iran war is totally going to end and or nothing's happening all at the same time. Little exchange of fire yesterday. Things mostly quiet after a few missiles, here and there. But more promises that a deal is imminent and more insistence from Iran that there aren't even negotiations going on. The chief negotiator of the Iran deal, of course, also at the game and waving to the crowd, as I said earlier, on his way in. So, no change visible in the near future on that one. In Washington, D.C., the news, I don't know. Let's see. I'm not certain what I would say is what others say is top of the news. But for me, let's see. I did find some interest in, Todd Blanche's formal nomination to permanently fill the job of Attorney General is said to have been announced. But you know me and my belief in Donald Trump paperwork. I'm not really sure. But the newspapers feel like they're confident in running with it. On the other hand, not so much over at DNI or ODNI, Office of the Director of National Intelligence. I think the consensus is, with the stories reporting that Trump says he will not nominate Bill Pulte permanently to the job of ODNI. The only thing is, as I was parked on a page from The Hill covering a different story, they were teasing, other stories they had elsewhere, and they put up some video, some auto-playing video promoting a story which appeared to be running under the headline that Bill Pulte had, in fact, been nominated permanently to head the ODNI. So I'm really not sure what to make of that. And under a normal administration, I'd say, I think the other guys, there's like 3-4 headlines I saw when I searched saying Trump says he's not going to do it. And maybe I would say I clicked off the video before saying, wait a minute, what the hell did that just say? I should have left it up there. But I would have said, I must have read it wrong. I think I assumed that he was going to do it because it was such a terrible idea that he might, in fact, do it. So I'm not really sure. We're going to have to track that one. I'm sure the bad news is coming eventually on that one. On the Todd Blanche front, I thought, there's everybody's covering the story, but I thought the most interesting headline that I could share with you, and then I guess the story that follows is from The Guardian. Sam Levine covering this one yesterday, but not until the evening hours. The headline reads, it's a quote from Todd Blanche at the beginning, "I love you, sir." That's the quote. And then colon, "Todd Blanche, devoted Trump enforcer, tapped to do his bidding full time." So there you go. And a couple more, I think, what happened to Todd Blanche pieces out there. That seems to be the consensus, is that people are pretty sure that he's just thrown his whole personality overboard in order to suck up to Trump and rise to power. Although I also did see, was it Sherilyn Ifill the other day speculating, everybody has been saying the line on Todd Blanche is what happened to him. He used to be a stand-up guy when he was an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York way back when, and even in private practice. He was normal and seemed to respect the rules of the court and the rules of law in general, and then yet seems to have lost his mind in pursuit of power, or, I don't know, infatuation with Trump, or I guess it's supposed to be the same thing. Can't really believe he's actually interested in Trump, but whatever. But she was pointing out, there are two possible stories here. He was a normal stand-up guy, and then he went bonkers for whatever reason for Trump. Or there's the possibility that maybe he wasn't so stand-up when he was assistant U.S. attorney. If he was this hungry for advancement and this interested in rising in the ranks, was he cutting corners maybe, or perhaps cheating a little bit in the wrong direction in order to get, I don't know, high-profile convictions or something like that so that he would be noticed and rise up the ranks? That's a good question, and an open one. We won't be getting any answers, of course, during the Trump administration. So, all right, well, here's the story that accompanies the "I love you, sir" quote from Todd Blanche. The subheader here reads, "Attorney General Pick joined Trump's legal team in 2023. There seems little doubt he would be prepared to carry out the president's wishes." And the problem is the president wishes for some really, really crazy, stupid stuff to start happening. Start happening. What am I saying? Keep happening, but escalate. Todd Blanche's nomination to be permanently made, the Attorney General, marks the apex of a gamble from a man who bet everything on representing Donald Trump and became one of his most steadfast and punishing enforcers. Trump announced the news at the White House on Monday. The nomination will require Senate confirmation to become permanent. It's a little shaky, I would say, about whether or not this works out for him. What with all our freelancers among the Republican ranks suddenly supposedly prepared to find their spines and their bravery again. But I don't think so. Anyway, Blanche was a relatively unknown lawyer until he joined Trump's legal team in March of 2023, just after Trump was indicted for the first time in a New York State case involving a hush money payment to Stormy Daniels. Remember that? Yeah. You can't even get yourself kicked out of the presidency with hush money paid to porn stars to have sex with you on golf retreats while your third wife is home with your infant son. Doesn't work anymore. Blanche, a registered Democrat until a few years ago, resigned a lucrative partnership at a Wall Street law firm to represent the president, essentially betting everything on Trump at a moment when Trump faced mounting criminal charges and the walls seemed to be closing in. It's a good point. Blanche began his career as a paralegal, in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, and attended law school at night before eventually becoming a prosecutor. Acquaintances have described him to the New York Times as a talented lawyer who is a centrist and competitive, except not anymore. Blanche's bet on Trump paid off spectacularly. Trump wound up facing no serious consequence in any of the 4 criminal cases he faced, and Blanche was rewarded with a post as the Deputy Attorney General, the number 2 official, and boy is he number 2, in the Justice Department. I mean, that must be an interesting story to recall for people who were, maybe hotshot assistant U.S. attorneys in the Southern District of New York, and a stupid-ass paralegal creeping around saying he's going to go to law school at night and become one of us. Now, Attorney General of the United States. And the paralegal says, by the way, there's such a thing as absolute presidential immunity, and you can totally pardon yourself, and it would be okay to sue the United States for $10 billion while you're president and then settle with yourself. If you just force the DOJ to accept the settlement, all of that would be okay, and you would be like, this kid's crazy. First of all, we should fire him as a paralegal. Second of all, you're never going to make it through law school with that idea, kid. You're out of your mind. Oh, yeah? I'll show you. I'll become the Attorney General of the United States of America and turn common law on its head and rip up the Constitution before I'm done, before I'm 60. I don't even know how old Todd Blanche is. I was going to say 50, but let me go find out. Anyway, it's rather remarkable, I'll say that. And, he's 51. All right, so there you go. Before I'm even 55. Before I'm even 52. For God's sake. Oh, well, August 6th is his birthday. He may not be confirmed before his 52nd birthday. All right. Anyway, moving on with the I Love You, Sir coverage over at The Guardian. When Trump fired Pam Bondi in April over frustration at the speed from which the department was moving, to prosecute his enemies, Blanche became the I almost missed my opportunity to say the acting Attorney General and wasted little time in getting things moving. Shortly after he took over, the department moved to vacate seditious conspiracy convictions against the Proud Boys, some of the most serious cases that have emerged from January 6th. The department fired career prosecutors and released a criticized report accusing them of wrongfully targeting anti-abortion protesters. So, like I said, standing everything on its head. And before I go too far with this, I guess as I was reading, he fired Pam Bondi, I am reminded that this could all end in tragedy for Todd Blanche, finding himself hopelessly devoted to Donald Trump and doing everything he asks, but fired later on anyway, either for good cause or bad, or just the old man's lost it even more, and he thinks I betrayed him, whatever. But so far it's working out. Anyway, it's just not his turn yet. Shortly after he took over, the department moved to vacate seditious conspiracy. Oh yeah, I did that one with the seditious conspiracy convictions of the Proud Boys, etc. The Justice Department also jump-started an investigation into John Brennan and other Obama-era officials the president reviles, that being the most important part of it. Charged the Southern Poverty Law Center with a specious 11-count indictment, and I don't think we even gave that enough attention. We should go back to that when there's new court developments. And filed a new criminal case against former FBI Director James Comey over a picture he posted on social media. Experts say the case is likely to be dismissed. One of the most consequential moves, the department under Blanche negotiated an agreement to resolve a $10 billion lawsuit filed by the president to create a secretive $1.8 billion fund to compensate allies. The agreement's been abandoned, but not all of it, after bipartisan backlash. Oh, and by the way, the part that's been abandoned can be easily recreated individually, as the DOJ is directed to just settle individual suits instead of claims on a fund. Blanche also personally signed a separate agreement giving Trump, his family, and related entities immunity from tax audits or on returns filed before the agreement was reached. That will shortly be erased and be, prospective as well. It always was. Anyway. He has also overseen a department where career lawyers have left in droves and judges have reprimanded federal prosecutors for their behavior in several cases. Grand juries, who are usually quick to approve indictments, have also taken the extraordinary step of declining to approve charges against defendants. Not that that stopped him. Judges have also accused prosecutors of misconduct before grand juries. All of those actions have left little doubt that Blanche and the Justice Department will do whatever it takes to serve Trump's interests, provided he's not fired and replaced by someone else who will do whatever it takes to serve Trump's interests. Todd Blanche has never stopped acting, and different usage there, as Donald Trump's personal lawyer. He has used his high position at the department to enter into a corrupt deal with the president and his family, advance vindictive prosecutions, illegally fire career employees, smear whistleblowers, and attack the judiciary, said Stacey Young, a former Justice Department lawyer who now leads Justice Connection, which advocates on behalf of former department attorneys. You now have to have one of those, I guess. Blanche has abandoned what he learned about blind justice and ethical law enforcement as a career federal prosecutor, or even as a paralegal or a night student. His unwavering fealty to the president and destruction of institutional norms should disqualify him from leading the only agency with its foundational virtue in its name. Isn't that nice? A vote to confirm him as Attorney General represents a rejection of the rule of law. That's a nice line. I don't think anybody's really going to apply it, but you should be thinking about that. When Republicans cast that vote in support of him, they vote to confirm him represents a rejection of the rule of law. You're just putting yourself outside of the rule of law. You're throwing out the Constitution. Blanche has also shown himself willing to take hits for the president on damaging stories when the Justice Department faced heavy criticism over its slow and confusing release. I guess they mean of the Epstein files. They don't actually say what, but I think we all know. Blanche defended the department's handling of the matter. Really, did they just, I don't know. Somebody zapped Epstein, possibly by accident, from the mention here. It's interesting, too, by the way. They're also, it reminds me, how terrible the slow and confusing release of results from California is, but how awesome the slow and confusing release of the Epstein files is. Anyway, don't look for any real constancy there, obviously. And they're different situations, certainly. But anyhow. When Republicans blew up over the slush fund for allies, it was Blanche who defended the agreement. Blanche has made it clear he has no qualms about carrying out the president's wishes. As to whether or not I want this job, I did not ask for this job. I love working for President Trump. It's the greatest honor of a lifetime, he said in April, shortly after being named the acting Attorney General. If he chooses to nominate somebody else and asks me to do something else, I will say, thank you very much. I love you, sir. I don't have any goals or aspirations beyond that. All I want in life is to be able to say, I love you, sir, to his orange deflated basketball face. Okay, a couple of things that reminded me of along the way. The part about the slow release and non-release of the Epstein files. By the way, I think the new line on that just in the last couple of days is, we're done releasing things. There are about 1 million documents off the mark on this one, but we're done releasing things. That's all we're ever going to release. It's not that there aren't more documents. It's just, we're definitely not going to release them regardless of what the law says. This whole article is about him saying, I don't care what the law says anymore. And maybe I never did, as Sherilyn Ifill suggests may be the case. And one day in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, we could take a look at that. He doesn't care about that, and he's going to do whatever it takes, up to and including, perhaps, let's see. Yesterday I saw a challenge of sorts leveled by Brian Beutler, who was writing in his, I don't know whether it's a Substack thing or not, but his newsletter, and then talking about a little bit on Blue Sky yesterday about the California situation. Right, that's where this was going from. It's I said that they were different situations, the Epstein files and the vote counting, but there's a broader similarity, I guess, between the two of them, which is in Trump and other Republicans' accusations, and every accusation of theirs is a confession. In those accusations, they say the slow release is what's giving rise to suspicion. The slow release, in their view, is evidence of wrongdoing, period. It isn't. I mean, or if it's certainly not proof of it. If it's evidence of it, it's the weakest possible kind. They're just inferring because it's slow. I feel like it's slow because you're puzzled over exactly how to cheat, and it takes you a little longer to cheat than to not cheat. So therefore, the delay equals cheating in my mind. And although there are different topics and different situations and different types of material and a different release mechanism, the questions about the propriety of the process and the opportunity for fraud, wrongdoing, cheating, what have you, on releasing the files is the same. It is the delay that makes people think there's something afoot here, and it's very similar in that sense. I'll get back to the, I guess I probably have about 30 seconds to do it, but Brian Beutler was saying yesterday, for all the accusations of fraud and wrongdoing and vote rigging and election rigging going on here, especially as he was targeting the L.A. mayor's race, he was most incensed about Spencer Pratt falling from second place to third place and thus being excluded from the general election ballot. And he was saying, well, they rigged the election. And Brian was saying, if you think they rigged the election, that's a federal crime. I await action on this. Where will the indictments come? When?
Hi, Kagro in the Morning listeners. This is Rebecca Romans, longtime listener and longtime supporter of the show. Do you love your non-corporatized, completely independent, commercial-free Kagro in the Morning show? Do you stand out among the crowd at the office water cooler when discussing current events because of all the up-to-the-minute news you've been brought by David Waldman? Then it's time to give back a little. David relies on contributions from listeners like you and me to keep this show on the air. Patreon.com is among the easiest ways to make secure recurring monthly donations to support the show. Patreon.com/KagroX will bring you straight to his donation page, where you can sign up for any convenient tier you like. A mere $5 a month. You'll never miss it. Works out to about 25 cents a show. That means that David is making 12.5 cents an hour, which, by coincidence, is exactly what the GOP wants to lower the federal minimum wage to. Once again, David is ahead of the curve. If Patreon.com doesn't sound like your kind of thing, there's always PayPal, or even the Square Cash app. Any way you choose to donate, please choose to donate. And thank you on behalf of David and the rest of us listeners. Thank you very much.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I was just checking my notes from Justice earlier on, like right at the top of the show, where he's telling me everything is A-OK, 5x5 in radio parlance. He does acknowledge, the volume, I guess my volume, down a little bit. It may just be discomfort with where I position myself relative to the microphone, and that may be it. And there's no way I can really adjust the volume on it. I just have to get in here. But it seems like, I don't know. To me, it sounds that much more weird and unnatural when you're that far in to the microphone, but maybe that's just one of those things, like everybody hates the sound of their own voice. All right. Anyway, I wanted to tell you about what Brian was talking about, although I don't have it handy here, but I am reminded of what he was saying. He was essentially saying, though, if Trump's accusations have any basis of truth, and I don't know why we start with a premise like that, but I guess, the press starts with premises like that. I don't know. The President of the United States is saying there must be something to it. He's saying they're rigging these elections. And Brian points out, rigging the election of the mayor of Los Angeles would certainly be a federal crime. Although, is it? I mean, it's not a federal election. But certainly the rigging, I'm sure you could charge somebody with something federally, and you would if you could. And that's his point, is I don't think that you really can. Or if you did, you would lose the case fairly quickly, and it would take a lot of the wind out of the sails of these charges of vote rigging, of election rigging. I mean, I don't know if it would really, because the people who believe in it are deluded, and there's really no point in showing them, demonstrating for them that in a court of law where we decide such things and decide the parameters of reality, you are wrong and everybody else was right. The election was fine and you made this up. And I mean, but we've told them this 100 times, or at least 60 something times in the aftermath of the 2020 election, and it made no difference. But I don't know. I guess it might make a difference for persuadable people who might otherwise have been inclined to be open to the president's position on this, but then respect courts. And I don't know what the Venn diagram looks like on that one. But what Brian was basically saying is, all right, look, if you think that this was done, I dare you. You have all the levers of power in the federal government. Bring charges. Demonstrate for the world, as Kristen Welker asked for the evidence. The court likewise will ask for evidence, and you'll be left without. However, I do want to point out that there's a downside to that strategy, and you should be aware of it. And the thing is, I'm not certain that they wouldn't take you up on that challenge. Would they be able to make the charges stick? I don't know. Probably not. I mean, I guess not, unless, of course, they got this somehow to Eileen Cannon's courtroom or Matthew Kaczmarek's courtroom, even though it would have, this is presumably something that would have taken place in California. Although I guess for the purposes of leveling the charges, if you're making the whole thing up, you might as well just say they hatched the plot to steal the election in the Southern District of Florida or the Northern District of Texas. That's where they were just there on vacation. They're like me. I happened to be in Amarillo when I came up with the idea. Boom. Matthew Kaczmarek has jurisdiction over the case. Maybe. Anyway, so far they have shown no indication of wanting to do that. But I guess as much as I wanted to cheer for Brian's idea, and I mean, do I even have? Did he write it up and put it in his newsletter? Or, I mean, I guess I'll take a look around here. What is his, does he, I can't remember how he mails it out, but I'll have to look and see whether he, I don't know, whether he put it in his newsletter or not, and whether I have a copy of it. But I certainly saw him talking about it on Blue Sky, and I guess I could go searching for it. But the point I really wanted to make is that if you dare them to bring those charges, I'm not sure that it ends in a clear demonstration that they don't dare bring those charges. It may end in them bringing those charges. It may end up in those charges eventually being dismissed, as they have been against so many others that Todd Blanche has directed be prosecuted, and Pam Bondi before him, and all the other cast of idiotic characters who have moved on since then, acting as fake U.S. attorneys when they did it. I can't even remember the other one. Alina Habba, and then what's her name? Lindsay something? No, not Graham, but all right. I've already forgotten her name, which is fantastic. I love it. Anyway, would they bring charges against, I don't even know who they would charge. Presumably, I guess, Karen Bass and, what was her first name again? Rats. I haven't learned, Raman. Is it Raman or Ramen? Or when he says ramen, when Greg says ramen, I think of Ramen instead. But shoot. All right. Well, I'll look it up. L.A. Mayor. It's Nathali. No, shoot. I just cannot bring it to mind. Nithya. All right. I'll get used to it because we'll be hearing the name for the next couple of months as the campaign goes on, and I'm sure it'll be very exciting. Nithya Raman. But I guess charge her? I don't know. I mean, remember, this is a stupid theory about rigging the elections here. So presumably she's the beneficiary of the rigging, so she's definitely totally in on it, except that, again, Karen Bass also will be moving on to the general, and there's no real reason to think she was interested in rigging the election such that she would have a more robust opponent come November. Her best bet was to run against the idiot Spencer Pratt, and for some reason she's totally in on rigging it the opposite way. But I don't know, the Democratic Party of California, the elections officials in Los Angeles counting the votes, I don't know who they would be doing this to, but would they charge them knowing that those charges would be thrown out rather quickly and might not even get to an indictment from a grand jury? Yes, because they keep doing it anyway to everybody else, and their real point in doing it is to be able to announce that you're under investigation and to be able to tell their base that you're a criminal as a result of that, even though another part of the Constitution and our basic beliefs in the legal system that they joyfully throw out every time they do this, you're innocent until proven guilty. Not here in this country. Trump gets to go on TV and say, we're investigating them. They're crooked. They're horrible, horrible people. They're so such lunatic liberals. They're trying to destroy the country. It's terrible, and we're the only ones trying to stop them. So that sort of chatter goes on for months, even after the charges are dropped. There's a corrupt judge threw the charges out. We're going to charge him too. So I don't doubt that they would try it. Well, I doubt it a little bit. And I think Brian doubts it a little bit too. But I am not so sure that we're on firm foundation there. And I don't know, I guess the people who were not being one of the people likely to be charged in all this, not me, not Brian Beutler. I guess it's easy to say, oh yeah, I dare you, bring charges. But if you are the person who's going to have to battle that charge and hire counsel to do it, knowing you'll win, knowing the charges will be thrown out, but knowing that it'll cost you $300,000 in legal fees to do it, if not more, that's probably on the cheap side. It's probably closer to $1 million just to get one of these cases taken care of now, because it's so high profile and it drags on forever. They appeal everything, and you're hiring presumably one of the most expensive lawyers in the country to do this work for you. It's a real burden. As is keeping your throat clear on a early summer morning. I don't know. Anyway, so it could be just for harassment purposes. You shouldn't leave that out. And there's another piece of evidence floating around out there. NBC News reports this one, slow in opening up, but here it comes. It's not directly related, but it should give you an idea of another reminder of how far out of their way they will go to create paper-thin claims that will cause people to, to feel harassed, to feel put upon, to feel persecuted, have to hire counsel and go through this stupid rigmarole. NBC News' headline here, Vance, that's J.D. Vance, refers Governor Tim Walz and Minnesota Attorney General to DOJ for fraud investigation. It's not clear what kind of investigation launching power the vice president has. I mean, ordinarily none, but I should ask you, how much power, investigative launching power, does the president have? 46 of them, none. And by design. One of them, though, well, I guess 45 of them, because I guess he counts as two of them. He's the size of two of them, so I guess that makes some sense. But yet, still, this president, of course, insists that he does have that power, and the DOJ appears to agree. They've reached a settlement out of court that the president really does have this power, you see. So why not the vice president? Because he's not Trump. Shut up, you stupid idiot. Go F a couch. Maybe he does not care for this. And I don't know whether it's authorized or not. And neither does Trump. Did I say that was okay? I have no idea. Vance refers Governor Tim Walz and the Minnesota Attorney General, whose name you will recognize when we get down to that part of the story, referred to DOJ for fraud investigation. Subheader, the Justice Department opened, so I guess they listened to him, a separate investigation. Oh, I'm sorry, it's separate. A separate investigation this year into the Democratic governor over allegations he helped impede immigration enforcement. This line of stories is going to go off on every single kind of tangent, I think, today. All right. So, but I offer this at the moment. The segue here is Brian Beutler's idea about sort of challenging the administration to bring charges in L.A. And if they don't, that's supposed to be taken as an admission that they know they're lying about California's election count and the L.A. mayoral race in particular. Will that work? Does that transfer? Does it mean anything? I'm not sure, but it's an interesting thought. I don't dismiss the thought by any means. It's something to think about because it's a thought. Well, of course it's something to think about. That was not helpful. Anyway, this piece from NBC News by Raquel Coronel Uribe and Tara Prindiville. Vice President J.D. Vance, he's the vice president, I should put that in front of there. Vice President J.D. Vance announced Monday that he is referring Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and State Attorney General, it's Keith Ellison. You remember Keith Ellison from Congress, right? Both Democrats, amazingly, to the Justice Department for a criminal fraud investigation involving social services programs. And what are we talking about? I don't know whether it's really connected to it at all, but it doesn't matter whether they're really connected to it all because there was nothing to connect it to. Remember that the whole administration line on Minnesota in general. Why did we storm it with ICE? Why are we referring Tim Walz for investigations? Why are we excluding certain World Cup referees who are supposed to be here in this country getting ready for the upcoming World Cup matches, excluding them from entry into the United States? And the answer is, I hate Ilhan Omar, and I heard she was from Somalia, or some, you know his word for it, some shithole country in Africa. And, I mean, he's been extraordinarily racist about it, but extraordinarily horrible to the Somali American population at any number of times he's been on the record. And you get him started about Somali Americans, who I'm sure he doesn't acknowledge as Americans at all. Yeah, they're all crooks. They're all horrible and fraud, and they come to this country. They have no country. They come to this country and they steal. Every single one of them is a thief. He's actually said, you know, you've seen it on the record, what he has to say about this. And his hatred of Ilhan Omar spreads out from there. All Somalians are horrific and terrible. Even the ones that have nothing to do with anything, who don't want to immigrate to the country. They're just here for the World Cup to be referees. Like this is by the way, I believe Ref of the Year for 2025. You know, no small potatoes here. These are the best of the best. And then he comes, but no, in fact, rejected from entry to the country. I've got a couple stories on that one, too. I'm just saying Trump's weird, insane prejudice against his hatred for Ilhan Omar has spread to even to this corner of the day's news. But first, what's J.D. Vance up to? The bird outside knows. Minnesota state officials are not above the law, says the weirdo who can't order donuts and won't stop effing couches. And if they facilitated fraud, lied under oath about what they knew, or harassed and intimidated whistleblowers, they must face justice. Well, they must, except they didn't do any of those things. But if they did, then they must. Vance wrote on Twitter, where vice presidents traditionally go to refer governors of states of the union to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation. You do it on Twitter. Everybody knows that. Adding that his referral was prompted by a letter and a report from the Republican-led House Oversight Committee. Why didn't they do it? I don't know. I think they were probably going to, and maybe Vance stole their headline. The committee's report, published Monday, alleged that Minnesota state officials, including Walz and Ellison, were, quote, aware of widespread taxpayer fraud in a federally funded social programs, or several of them, for years, and did not take steps to stop it. Federal program, fraud going on. Why don't the federal officials take steps to stop it? Oh, they didn't. But these people were nearby, so they're the ones in trouble. Walz's and Ellison's office did not immediately respond to requests for comment Monday night on the criminal referral, but their spokespeople were dismissive of the GOP report in statements to other news outlets. The committee also wrote a letter Sunday urging Vance, in his capacity as the head of the White House's task force to eliminate fraud, there's the connection, to review Minnesota's social services program. So they invited him to steal their thunder. That's pretty dumb. He did it. Vance was named head of the task force in February after President Donald Trump announced a war on fraud in his State of the Union address. I need a war on fraud leader. He's looking around. There's a guy behind me. Give it to him. Shortly after that announcement, Vance and Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Administrator, that's Dr. Oz, Mehmet Oz, everybody knows, the Oprah guy, said they were pausing federal Medicaid reimbursements to Minnesota. Walz said at the time that the move had, quote, nothing to do with fraud, calling it a campaign of retribution. Trump is weaponizing the entirety of the federal government to punish blue states like Minnesota, Walz said on February 25th, but he also said it on Twitter, so that's unfortunate. Minnesota came under federal scrutiny earlier in Trump's second term over allegations of fraud involving daycare centers. You remember that lie. The state said in January that child care facilities at the center of those allegations were not operating improperly. Federal law enforcement agencies in April conducted a series of raids to look into allegations of welfare fraud under what the Department of Homeland Security said at the time were search warrants, quote, relating to the rampant fraud of American taxpayer dollars. Oh, no. Not that. Not $10 billion at a time, I hope, or not $1.8 billion at a time. Trump and his allies claimed the fraud was conducted by the state's Somali community. They went straight at it. A frequent target of his, Walz appeared to laud the raids, saying that they took place in collaboration with authorities in Minnesota and happened because our state agencies caught irregular behavior and reported it. So where they did see fraud, they did something about it. But, of course, it was Vance's claim, no, they didn't, and we're going to arrest the people or attempt to arrest the people who actually did some arrests for fraud when they did spot it. Did they conclude that all Somalis are, in fact, fraudsters? No. Did they find that there might be some? Yes. Did they think it might be best for everybody if they cracked down on it? Yes. So they did. Well, you're not a Republican, so you're also under arrest. Anyway, that's how the system's supposed to work, and our agencies will keep at it as long as there are fraudsters around to put behind bars, Walz wrote again on Twitter, adding that people who commit fraud in Minnesota will get caught. It's not the first time the Justice Department under Trump has opened an investigation into Walz, wowee, who was the former Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate in the 2024 presidential election, of course. The Justice Department launched a probe into Walz and Democratic Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, F-R-E-Y. Minneapolis folks can shout at their computers right now. Go ahead, listening. Anyway, alleging that they conspired to impede federal immigration enforcement through public statements. Oh, yeah, the old statement imposition. Okay. The investigation came after a surge of immigration officers to Minneapolis, which led to protests and killing. Of course, it's mentioned right here. And federal officers killing Renee Good and Alex Preddy. Walz has called that investigation politically motivated. And so is Trump, basically. I think he's willing to admit that it's politically motivated. I don't think that frightens him at all. So anyway, the point of this was, if they're going to do this, then they might just as well also say, you know what? Yeah, we will investigate everybody, anybody we feel like investigating, anybody that we don't like in California or anywhere else for that matter, for the supposed crime of rigging the California gubernatorial elections, the California LA mayoral elections, any elections we didn't like the outcome of. We'll investigate everybody around, anybody we can, for fraud. Sounds like a plan. Sounds like a Trump plan anyway. So as I mentioned, yes, this poor unfortunate guy from Somalia, a top referee in the World Football Association's being barred from entry into the country. I have seen it. Well, I guess it's spreading now throughout the news. The first report I had of it was from Al Jazeera English, and I'm not afraid to read their thing, but they're not my favorite news outlet. And I was actually sort of wondering whether I would see in time for the show any coverage from the BBC about it. I have a New York Times piece about it too, which is actually interesting because it details. We'll see if the BBC part piece does detail this, but the headline and subheader of the New York Times piece outlines just what an ordeal he went through trying to get into the country to do his job to be a part of the World Cup. But I was hoping for a BBC coverage of it, mostly because they're just that much more soccer crazy, and they've also had a longer time to pay attention to and care about how horrible and corrupt an organization FIFA actually is. And I thought they might be more outraged at the exclusion from a standpoint that we might understand better than maybe the Al Jazeera one. Although the Al Jazeera one I'm guessing that their coverage is a little more like, yeah, this is horrific and racist, and it is. But I actually was more interested in, was the BBC going to cover the fact that this is terrible for world football, as they call it, everywhere else in the world, and that they might raise that objection. So it's interesting. They might, in fact, be three different valuable approaches to the story. But I'm going to read the BBC one first and see where we get with that and see whether that's enough. But just to put the story on record here, Somali referee Artan, I guess that's his last name, Artan, we'll get rid of this pop-up ad in just a second, barred from entering U.S. There's a photo of him here in his official gear during one of the big games. He's been, the caption says, a FIFA referee since 2018. And I don't know. I mean, I guess that's important in case the Trump administration starts to say some garbage like, he's really a terrorist. They're already on that. He's really a terrorist, and they're just trying to smuggle him into the country. They turned him into a referee. They told him, here, here's a whistle and a bomb. Go to the United States. No, nothing like that. No one should ever believe anything as ridiculous as that anyway. But, just in case you had, I don't know, how would anybody have heard how long this guy's been a referee? All right. Mike Peter is the BBC sports journalist, and he's accompanied here on the byline here by Abnasir Ali from the BBC News, Omar Artan, and Omar will get you stopped at the border every time these days, well, who is set to be the first Somali, I guess, ever to referee at the World Cup finals. He was going to, oh my God, he was supposed to be the ref for the finals. Obviously, he's going to ref all along the way, too. I guess it's obvious. I mean, we don't think that they just lie around eating grapes waiting for the finals, right? Has been dropped from the list of officials after he was denied entry into the United States. And that's the part I'm really interested in all of this. Like, there's no pushback from FIFA, and I guess no one should have expected it. We've been telling you for years, even though I don't follow FIFA or soccer, like, actually as a sport closely. But we have on this show for years covered from time to time the corruption of FIFA. It's, like the International Olympic Committee, there are a couple of stuffed shirts that sit at the top of these things and collect money along the way and just do dumb and corrupt things, and nobody really cares so long as the soccer games go on and the Olympics happen. I mean, people care, but they don't not go, or they don't lose interest in watching, because I guess they still think the contests, the sporting contests themselves, are fair, even if there's corruption all around them. And shut up and let me watch the ball game or whatever we're watching it, right? But anyway, I'm most interested in this aspect of it because this is a flagrant violation of every sort of understanding, overt and otherwise, that's supposed to happen between the host country and the international organization running the event. And you don't stand in the way of teams or doctors or coaches or whoever getting visas to come and cover the world event. You're supposed to be bringing the world together. That's the whole point of, it's said to be the whole point of the competition itself. In fact, of course, it is raking in millions of dollars and stealing a lot of it. But people like the explanation of world unity better. And FIFA has an interest in seeing these things go forward in such and such a way, up to and including, like, they selected the guy to be the ref for the finals, right? And then Donald Trump says, no, you can't. I mean, where's FIFA's ego? Why aren't they saying, well, what do you mean no? Get this guy in. Stop this nonsense. We're going to turn the whole thing off. Remember, I guess half of these games, I don't know, what's the number, being held in Mexico and Canada. Let's just move them all there. Hell, we've had to move some of the competitors' teams' bases into other countries already. They should have objected to that. But FIFA is not only sitting on their hands about it, they're agreeing. They're knuckling under to Trump. What does Trump know? I can't believe that the president of FIFA sits there. I mean, we know how corrupt he is and how he's a big Trump fan, but he sits there and says, you know what, who knows better how to run international football than me? Trump. I'm going to do things his way. So they say scratched him. Forget it. Never mind. No effort to get him in. No effort to say, come on, you're being ridiculous. I'll give you $1 million. I'll give you a medal. How about this? Trump, you're going to get a trophy. Another trophy, another gold medal. Let him in. Come on. Why not bribe the way in? But no, they drop him. So there you have it. Artan, the 2025 Confederation of African Football Men's Referee of the Year, was barred from entering the country at Miami International Airport and is currently in Turkey, or Turkey as we now say. No reason for Artan's repatriation has been issued by U.S. immigration authorities. And I mean, he's not from Turkey, but I guess he's on his way back to Somalia. He hasn't been repatriated, but he has been ejected from the United States. What's the reason? No reason. But Somalia is one of several countries on a travel ban list introduced by President Donald Trump's administration. And yet the Iranians are on their way. So you have that. After speaking to U.S. authorities, world governing body FIFA said Artan will miss the tournament. How amazing is that? FIFA can confirm that match official Omar Abdul Qadir is his middle name, I guess. Omar Abdul Qadir Artan will be unable to train and officiate the FIFA World Cup at the whole thing, not just the finals, in 2026 after he was denied entry into the United States, read a statement. FIFA is not involved in host country immigration processes. I'm sure they have no say whatsoever, including visa adjudications, and has been informed by authorities that Mr. Artan's status will not be changed at present. In line with previous FIFA events, a host government ultimately determines who receives a visa and who is admitted into their country. I don't know whether that's a real policy or not. Oh, we're fighting with the mute button once again. All right. Well, yeah, one of the things about now I'm positioning the microphone differently to try to boost the volume levels, and I can't get a good look at the mute button. So, all right. Well, pardon the weird reentry here, but welcome back. I want to continue with the BBC coverage of this story. And, I don't know whether that's a real... I mean, I don't put it past FIFA to not really hold that position as policy. I mean, actually, I wouldn't doubt that it might be a policy. Look, we're just FIFA. We don't get involved in such things. But I have a feeling that if a host country, what if a host country was worried about, and we're talking about an authoritarian wackadoodle country like the United States or Russia or China or somebody else. What if you're in the competition and you know the draw and you know who you're facing and you're just saying, if only that stupid team wasn't in our group, we'd have a real shot at winning this thing. And then you just say, you know what? That country's terrorists and we're not letting them into the country. I mean, would FIFA say, that's fine, we'll get another country. All right, you're going to play, I don't know who I'm going to pick here, because anybody you pick, like I could say somebody who's a traditionally not a football power, but I think then they'll be insulted if I choose them. But all right, we're going to put somebody else in instead. And I mean, you still got to play the game, and they're going to be a little bit motivated to kick your ass if possible. But you're telling me that FIFA would say, it's our policy. There's nothing we can do. The host country gets to decide who gets in for visas. The United States has decided to deny visas to everybody in the world, and instead they want to play, they want to play kids, youth, girls soccer teams from, around the United States, so that even if they lose somehow to the girls, the United States still wins. How about that? Is that okay? Yes, says FIFA. But apparently not. I mean, I think the issue would have, of course, come down to this. I'm sure what's really being considered here is that FIFA is saying, how much money do we lose if the games are reffed by someone else? None. How much money do we lose if we say, I don't know, the United States has denied the visa of Germany, Denmark, England, you name it. Anybody else that might actually go, Brazil, Argentina, I don't even know who's in it. But the usual powers, Netherlands, everybody, everybody's out. You're all excluded. The United States wins. Hooray. Does FIFA stand for that? No, because money is lost. So that's, I guess, basically probably what it comes down to. Here's the rest of the story. Again, the claim is FIFA is not involved in host country immigration processes, and I'm sure that's their preference. And it might even be their policy, because normally no country would do anything like what I said. And most people, even huge FIFA followers from around the world, would probably say it's a disgrace, but it's one ref. I mean, any of the refs presumably would be just as good. I'm sure there's a 2025 men's ref of the year from a different division of FIFA who'd be just as good. And while it's unfair and a tragedy, and Americans should concentrate their efforts on getting rid of this autocratic dictator idiot, we'd rather see the game be played. So there you go. In line with previous FIFA events, the host government ultimately determines who receives a visa and who's admitted into their country. And I assume that, again, under normal circumstances, a host country probably would insist on that power just in case someone wanted to use the World Cup as cover to bring known terrorists into the country. But the assumption being this is a responsible world government, somebody who's interested in goodwill and the good reputation of their country, and they're not going to anger the rest of the football-loving world by playing politics with the game. They're just going to steal money like everybody else does. All right. Referees chief Pierluigi Collina has created a training hub for the tournament's 52 referees and 88 assistant referees in Miami. That's why he was headed for Miami, of course. But that's the end of his involvement in the story, it looks like. He doesn't say anything like, hey, this is a effing outrage, and all the refs are going on strike. Nothing. That's it. All on-pitch officials must stay at the base in Florida for training, preparation, and security. It would therefore not be possible for Artan to stay outside the United States and only referee matches played in Canada or Mexico. But wouldn't it? Because the Iranian team was supposed to be in Tucson, but now they're not. And instead they're in Mexico, and they'll go to their games in the United States and then leave the United States immediately thereafter. But why? And why are they based where they're based? Were there no security measures in place in Tucson, and did they not move to Mexico? Why not have one more camp, maybe just for him, or let him stay with one of the teams so long as he's not refereeing any of their games? But I guess you never know whether he'll be refereeing their games in the finals or not. I understand the desire to separate the refs from the teams, but, this is also a pretty good excuse to just not go out of their way to get this guy involved in the game. A senior advisor to Somalia's Ministry of Youth and Sports confirmed the denial of entry to the BBC and said Artan had been traveling with valid documents, so it isn't that. A Somali embassy official in Nairobi told the BBC that Artan's diplomatic passport had been issued specifically to ease his travel after earlier visa difficulties. So they actually gave him a diplomatic passport. They consider FIFA a diplomatic mission in the rest of the country, or in the rest of the world, I guess, or maybe just in Somalia. I don't know. Maybe that's not the case. Do all FIFA officials get diplomatic passport, or is it just the refs, or is it just this guy because his regular passport wasn't always honored wherever he went? I don't know, but it's not a bad idea, I guess, to see if you can send them that way. But the point is, a diplomatic passport was issued, and the United States said to hell with diplomatic passports, as well as to hell with FIFA and their stupid rules about who they get to name as referees. Both seem equally unacceptable, but both were done. Speaking in a statement to Reuters, Artan said that despite the circumstances, he was in a positive mood and focused on the next challenge. That's a very sportsmanlike way of handling it, I guess. I would like to thank FIFA, I don't know why, and CAF, I think that's his short for the Conference of African Football, his organizing regional, whatever you would call it, I don't know, conference. I would like to thank FIFA and CAF for all their support, really. And I promise to keep my refereeing levels up as I concentrate on the future. He said he doesn't want to lose the job refereeing at the world level, I guess. So you got to say that, even though they didn't do a goddamn thing for you when they were supposed to. But they do allow him to continue. I want to thank the football family for their message and wish my colleagues all the best success during the World Cup, and I look forward to joining them again in future competitions. The Somali Football Federation has contacted FIFA seeking urgent clarification. Speaking to BBC World Service's Andrew Giuliani, oh my God, vomit, who leads the White House task force on the World Cup. I didn't even realize there was one. I didn't realize he was still around. But there you go. Well, I can't go into the I can't go into the derog. That's apparently, and then brackets, it says derogatory information on that. I didn't realize they had an abbreviation for that, or a code word for that. Derog. He's mogging the derog. Anyway, while I can't go into the derog on that, I can tell you it was the right decision by Customs and Border Patrol, and I support that decision. Now, you can't tell me that. The World Cup runs from June 11th to July 19th. An official in the Somali National Football League Championships, Artan became a FIFA referee in 2018 and has officiated at the Africa Cup of Nations. Artan's plight is the latest fiasco to hit the World Cup, with Iran's Football Federation stating on Tuesday that their allocation of fan tickets for the group stage has been revoked. I'm not going to be able to get any of this sentence out, but basically they said no Iranian fans are getting any tickets either. Again, like FIFA, where are you with all of this? Nothing I can do about it. Says pundit, is he a pundit as well? Pundit and former England striker Ian Wright has labeled the tournament a World Cup of chaos, saying in a video on Instagram, every few hours it's another story about fans denied, players denied, officials denied, journalists denied, and now refs. I'm laughing, but it's not funny. It's actually not funny, and something has to be said. The most expensive tickets ever, expensive accommodation, transport through the roof. Is this how the hosts behave for the greatest game? Well, we think the game sucks, so I guess that's the answer to that. I think it's fine, but here in America, the official position is it sucks and it's not masculine. So there you go. Real football involves smashing everybody else and not using your feet. Okay. So is this how the host behaves for the greatest game, the greatest tournament in the world? Are we not hearing more? Are we seeing how Qatar got dragged? Are we not hearing more? Is this the spirit of football, really? Oh, that's interesting, too, because Qatar, of course, they hosted it. Was it the last time? And, the whole lead up to and follow through all the way through the end of the tournament. Everybody, well, there's horrible conditions for the workers, and there's no human rights in this country, And now that it's happening in the United States, everybody's afraid to say anything, as they say, this team can't stay here, that guy can't ref, that journalist isn't allowed, no fans allowed from this country. I feel for the American fans who are desperate for this, how embarrassed they must be, how embarrassing for them this must be. He says both. This is a World Cup of chaos. I don't know. Does that deserve dramatic music? A World Cup of chaos! Maybe. So, I don't know. I think it should be a bigger story, or at least deserves coverage from a couple different angles. I don't know whether, let me just see how long the New York Times piece is, because something not covered in the BBC piece is alleged to have been covered by the New York Times here. Somali referee says his World Cup dream is dashed. We got that sense. After U.S. denies entry. I had the right papers and everything, Omar Abdul Kadir Artan said in his first interview since he was turned back. He would have been the first Somali to referee a game in the tournament. And, I mean, the finals? Wow. So, point of pride for the country. So, naturally, Donald Trump is going to deny it to them. Matthew Mpoke Big, B-I-G-G, is the reporter here, based in Nairobi. And so I'm sure well familiar with African football in general. A referee from Somalia said on Tuesday that the biggest dream of his professional life had been shattered after the American authorities denied him permission to enter the United States to participate in the World Cup soccer tournament. That much we know. Let's see. One of 52 referees from the entire world selected for the World Cup in North America. That's us. He was one of 7 African referees to be chosen for the tournament and would have been the first Somali to referee a World Cup game. I don't know. The word final is disappearing from all of this, too. So I have my questions about whether or not that was the case. Speaking for the first time since he was denied entry to the United States, Mr. Artan told the New York Times that officiating a World Cup game would have been a symbol for all Somalis of what they could achieve in spite of their country's difficulties. I am very, very disappointed, Mr. Artan said in a telephone interview from Istanbul, the city he had been flown to after he was refused entry. I'm just simply a referee who's trying to live his dream, the biggest dream of my life, to come to the World Cup. I'm sure it was a little bit damaged when they found out, though, at the time, this is going to coincide with the World Cup being in the United States under Trump. Damn it. All right. Well, and by the way, no explanation from the Trump administration that was already stated, but that's probably because the explanation literally comes down to, I think the president hates Somalis. I think he'd be happy I don't think Trump ordered it. He's got no idea Somali referees are coming. But somebody who had it, I guess Giuliani might be the one. He'll be really pleased if I exclude a Somali and make a big stink over that so he could go on the air and say that, well, the reason we didn't let him in, why should we let a referee in when he comes from a country where everybody is a liar and everybody cheats and everybody's corrupt and loves fraud? I guess we'll wait and see whether he bothers to make that statement. Mr. Artan flew to Miami on Saturday, 5 days before the first game of the tournament on Thursday. Oh, really? All right. But was prevented from entering the United States by border officials who took him aside and questioned him in a small room overnight. It took a while. I had the right papers and everything. I had the right visa, Mr. Artan said, adding that he also showed documentation from FIFA as well as photographs of his career over a decade as a professional referee. Imagine he knew there was going to be trouble, I guess. He brought that with him. Border officials also checked online material detailing Mr. Artan's career. He said he was named Referee of the Year in 2025 by the Confederation of African Football, which governs soccer in Africa. The immigration interview ended after 11 hours, Mr. Artan said. Here he's putting on the bravest front possible. I just wish my colleagues well. 11 hours in interrogation and deported to Turkey. And he's still, playing the role. And he was then taken to a separate holding cell, I guess, after the 11 hours of interrogation, where he was detained for several further hours before being put back on a flight to Istanbul. He said the officials did not give him a reason for refusing him entry. U.S. Customs and Border Protection said in a statement that decisions were made on a case-by-case basis and did not provide details about why Mr. Artan had been denied entry. The traveler underwent additional inspection, a routine part of CBP's inspection process when officers need to verify information or determine admissibility, the statement said. Following inspection, the traveler, a referee for the FIFA World Cup, was determined to be inadmissible due to vetting concerns and was denied entry. So they do admit, yes, he was legitimately a FIFA World Cup referee. He has the right papers. I don't think anybody said the papers are wrong. This is just their way of saying, We thought the president would laugh if he heard we threw a Somali out. Mr. Artan said, I think they have a problem with my country. Yeah, that's his most controversial thing he said. I mean, he's right, but that's what they'll point to. Why not? Shut up and ref. I can't. They won't let me. Anyway, Mr. Artan said, I think they have a problem with my country, adding that he would return to the Somalia capital, Mogadishu, on Wednesday. That's tomorrow. Good luck. Hope you make it there safely. He said that he had been preparing for the World Cup for 4 years, taking courses with FIFA in Qatar and in the United Arab Emirates. And I thought we loved those guys, but I guess that's not enough. The Trump administration has imposed severe travel and visa restrictions on Somalia, a country in East Africa, and it was not clear whether FIFA had sought clearance for Mr. Artan to enter the United States. Why not? Why didn't they do it? Why isn't it clear whether or not they did? FIFA did not immediately respond to a request for comment, but confirmed in a statement that Mr. Artan would not be able to officiate at the World Cup. Sorry, and they give the same, statements as you heard in The Guardian. It was unclear why Mr. Artan could not have been considered for referee duty in Mexico or Canada, although we got a clarification on that from the BBC reporting, I think, or at least one explanation for it. Let's see. Artan was interviewed, and I guess he recounted his journey to the United States, which he said had begun last week in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, where he waited to secure travel papers. Once the documents arrived, he flew to Istanbul. That's maybe why he got sent back there, before catching a connecting flight to Miami ahead of a pre-tournament meeting of FIFA referees in the city. Mr. Artan said that border officials had asked him why he had come to the United States and about politics in Somalia. Those questions, Mr. Artan said, included many about the militant group Al-Shabaab, well known as soccer players, of course, which controls part of Somalia and which has fought a years-long insurgency against the government. The relationship between the United States and Somalia has been fraught in recent years. I guess that's true. In December, President Trump singled out Somali immigrants, and really he does every day, calling them, quote, garbage. Let that sink in a tirade at the White House, let that sink in, and saying that Somalia was, quote, not even a country. Nonetheless, the Pentagon has been working with Somalia's government to conduct scores of airstrikes against militant targets in the country, so a cooperative government allowing Trump and Hegseth to bomb to their heart's content, but can't come into this country because you're garbage. Yeah. Something, respect the office, yada, yada, tan suit, jeans, what have you. Outrageous. Other countries attending the World Cup have faced difficulty traveling to the United States, by the way. Last week, members of Iran's soccer team were granted visas to enter the country after months of uncertainty caused by the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran, but more than a dozen members of the team's support staff were denied entry. So, of course, they're going to play their best game. The water guys didn't get into the country. So, Iran gets to play dehydrated. All right. I am mildly interested now in seeing whether or not the Al Jazeera coverage of the story adds any further detail, but I might guess that this might be enough for our coverage of it, but I am sort of interested in their take just to round things out. U.S. confirms it denied entry to Somali referee set to take part in World Cup. DHS says award-winning referee Omar Artan was, quote, determined to be inadmissible due to vetting concerns after arriving in Miami. And I guess no more information than that. Ali Harb is the writer of this piece for Al Jazeera English, trying to skip the parts we already know about when he arrived, how many referees there are, etc. Somalia is on President Trump's travel ban list. The president has often disparaged the country and its people. Then, of course, once again, reminder that he called everybody in the country garbage. Artan, one of Africa's top referees, was set to become the first Somali to officiate a World Cup match. Time to reread that first article to see whether he really was slated to be part of the finals or not. I don't even know if they've made that determination yet. Mention of the Iran team being diverted to Mexico. Then, of course, a Muslim group here, I think it's CARE here in the United States, denouncing the travel bans. There's also growing concern about federal agents harassing foreign nationals and targeting undocumented immigrants in and around stadiums. On Monday, Zoran Mamdani, the mayor of New York, rebuked the Trump administration's plans for a surge of ICE agents in the city during the tournament. His city is set to host fans for several matches, including the final, which will take place in nearby New Jersey. Not New York at all, but you know how they are about that. When they need New Jersey, they are eager to embrace it. Oh, no, this is where the final is being played. New York. Yes, New York. You know, New Jersey. Soccer would not exist without immigrants. Immigrants play and coach the game, work in the stadiums, fill the stands, and make celebrations like the World Cup possible. 6 of the players on the U.S. men's national team are immigrants, Mamdani wrote in a social media post. No word on which social media it was posted on. We will not allow ICE or anyone else to sow fear in our communities, especially at this moment. As the world comes to our city, we will stand proudly with our immigrant neighbors and reject these attacks for what they are, an attempt to divide us. And what better time to divide us than during an international sporting event dedicated to world unity, right? The Council on American Islamic Relations, that's CARE, decried the travel bans after Artan was denied entry. Our nation should not ban anyone from our shores simply because of their race or their ethnicity, and yet there they are. That's especially true of a coach or referee or anyone else coming to participate in the World Cup. Edward Ahmed Mitchell, CARE's deputy director, told Al Jazeera, Somali visitors go through the same vetting process that other visitors go through, and once someone has gone through that or through vetting process, there's no reason to ban them from our country simply because of their nationality. Doing so is an affront to our values and the law. FIFA, of course, says it's up to the U.S. Same explanation as before. That might, in fact, even be policy. It's just doesn't meet the moment. Earlier this year, in an interview with Al Jazeera in Mogadishu, Artan said it was an honor to appear on football's brightest stage, despite the hardships and civil strife in Somalia. Could have been a great example to him, but no. The referee added that at times he has to change his route to his local stadium because of explosions in the country. You cannot give up as a referee. You have to have a target. I had this target, the World Cup, but it was not an easy job, he said. You have to continue and you have to fight if you want to go to a place like the World Cup. And I guess there's more fighting ahead because you didn't make it to the World Cup. Thanks, Trump. All right. That's more than enough time for that subject. Time to move on to a couple of other things. But I don't know. I found that to be extraordinarily important in my view. Maybe we can spend some more time finishing up on the Alabama redistricting case that we were reading Steve Vladeck about yesterday. There's more to his article. We'll do that in the last segment. Just to put something on the map here, and I feel like we'll leave more room for Greg to do more in his next couple segments. He loves to point out some of the things that are going on in Virginia and remind me that I don't know what the hell's going on in Virginia. Greg Sargent, though, does, and that means Greg Dworkin will know it by tomorrow. Deep in rural Virginia, that's about as far from me as you can get in Virginia, a MAGA pro-gun push, no surprise, takes an unnerving turn. Have you heard about this one? I don't know if it's made it, it's in national outlets, obviously, but too many other outrages for this to have risen to the top of everyone's radar screen, if it matters on a radar screen. Are things that are on top of any more importance? No, probably not. It's a big circle. Anyway, mixing my metaphors there and making no sense. Governor Spanberger signed an assault weapons ban. That sounds pretty good. But Democratic majorities in both houses of the legislature, Democratic governor, take advantage. Press your advantage. Do the right thing, right? Governor signed an assault weapons ban. Some county prosecutors in pro-Trump areas say they won't enforce it. Oh, I didn't know that was okay. Is a new MAGA nullification movement brewing? I'm sure it's not new, but it is here. Is it brewing? Sure. I guess that's a way to describe it. When Governor Abigail Spanberger signed a new assault weapons ban in Virginia last month, it got almost zero national news coverage. I didn't see it, but that's, I don't know. Yet it amounted to an important milestone. It marked the first time in U.S. history that such a gun control measure was passed into law by any state government in the American South. Okay. You can make a statement out of that. So, It's sadly fitting that passage of this law has been greeted by what you might call its very own nullification movement. Well, that's a tradition in the South. That's right. In a brewing situation that has gone largely overlooked, a number of county-based prosecutors in red areas of Virginia are publicly declaring that they will not enforce the new ban on assault-type weapons. This movement is taking shape as a direct, openly confrontational challenge to the authority of Spanberger and the Virginia legislature that passed the measure, and it only appears to be growing. Oh, I'm just in time for the music there, too. It is an abdication by MAGA elected officials of their duty to enforce the law. State Delegate Dan Helmer, a Democrat who represents a Northern Virginia district and co-sponsor of the measure, tells me, the law bans the sale, purchase, and manufacture of many military-style semi-automatic assault weapons and high-capacity magazines of more than 15 rounds, among other things. At least 9 of Virginia's, quote, Commonwealth attorneys, that's what they call them here, have joined in it.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, let me read a little bit more from whatever the hell we were doing here before the break. I'm already losing track. But from Greg Sargent of the New Republic talking about what's going on with the assault weapons ban in Virginia. Where we left off, we had just begun saying that at least 9 of Virginia's Commonwealth attorneys, who are elected countywide and serve as chief law enforcement officers, have now issued statements declaring that they don't intend to uphold the new law. All the counties in question voted for Donald Trump in 2024, not that that's any excuse, of course, by lopsided margins, some by more than 40 or 50 points, and many are deeply rural. But as you know, there's a little clause in the Constitution that says, we are a nation of laws and not men, except in rural areas where we are a nation of, I guess, cows. But whatever. Law, not cows? No. Cows, not law. After careful review of the legislation and existing Supreme Court precedent, I find the assault weapons ban signed by the governor unconstitutional and as a result unenforceable. Philip Blevins, the Commonwealth attorney for Smythe County. I think, do we say Smythe or do we say Smith? Even though it is pronounced, there's no E on the end. Smyth. Give you some indication of what's going on here and the connection between northern and southern Virginia. I don't know how that county is pronounced. There's a Wytheville, which is spelled sort of similarly, Wyth. It's not Wytheville, but Wytheville. But I don't know how you pronounce Smith County. Anyway, it is a rural area in the Appalachian southwestern corner of Virginia, backing Trump by 60 points. They may not know how to pronounce the county because reading is stupid. All right. Anyway, the stakes here are considerable. The law already faces legal challenges from gun rights groups. They're the ones in those challenges at the courts. They'll determine whether or not it's unconstitutional. Really not your job at the Commonwealth attorney level. But who cares? Because something. And if you had tried to say you weren't going to enforce, I don't know, marijuana laws, or for that matter, federal permission for same-sex marriages, to happen. Well, I just don't think it should happen that way. Like, what's her name? What was her name in Kentucky, right? The county clerk in Kentucky, Kim something or other, that decided, I'm just not going to issue marriage licenses. But, hey, that's crazy that you can't just defy the law. If you want to make a challenge, that's one thing, but you can't just, stand up and do it on your own. You could bring a suit, but I guess you can't bring I don't know. They'd probably say you don't have standing to just complain about it. You have to actually take the action first and see if you can defend against the criminal charges that ensue, or the lawsuits filed by people who are denied. But as with everything else under this Supreme Court and the judicial system that we have, weirdly, conservatives let other conservatives get away with this stuff, and nobody gets away with anything if you're a Democrat. Why? We're even investigating you for fraud if we find out there was fraud in the state you're the governor of. That's enough for us. We'll bring you up on charges. Anyway. So, yes, where were we? The groups and the prosecutors alike argue that assault-style rifles are in common use and that banning them steps outside the nation's historic traditions of firearms regulation. It really doesn't. Of course, we've had assault weapons bans in the past. They expired, and people have been trying to authorize them ever since. But, oh well, never mind that part of the tradition. We want to talk about the other part of the tradition, which is step 2, where the thing expired after 10 or 20 years. It was 10 years maybe. And from then on is when history began. Anyway, the worry about historic traditions of firearm regulations, that, of course, under Supreme Court precedent, renders Virginia law unconstitutional, because the last time they faced one of these things, these gun suits, the conservatives on the court said, well, we're really looking at the tradition of gun regulation in this country. For several hundred years, when all we had was flintlock rifles, there was no regulation. Of course, there was no regulation of a lot of things that we have regulation of now, but never mind any of that. But the prosecutors are taking this further. They appear to be suggesting they won't enforce the law beginning the moment it takes effect on July 1st, even if the courts haven't weighed in by then, while vowing to still prosecute violent crimes, of course. Though some of them describe this as exercising prosecutorial discretion, it seems to mean something more, that as a general matter, people who buy or sell these weapons illegally may simply not face prosecution. Indeed, some of the prosecutors are even arguing, in effect, that the sovereignty of the people within these counties overrules the authority of the state legislature, which is also duly elected, and relieves them of any obligation to enforce its new gun control law. Several sheriffs in these same counties have also declared their refusal to enforce it. So now what? Virginia Attorney General Jay Jones, a Democrat, is warning these prosecutors that they must enforce the new measure. Commonwealth's attorneys are elected to enforce our laws, which is what we expect them to do when these laws take effect on July 1st, Jones said in an emailed statement. But his office hasn't said whether it's examining actions it might take against them, or what actions, if any, are available. This appears unlikely to go away and seems all but certain to come to a head. Indeed, Helmer, the delegate from Northern Virginia, argues that this movement is not mere posturing. It amounts to a direct challenge to state legislative authority. The context is a culture of lawlessness that pervades the Republican Party under Trump, and it's extending down to Republican elected officials who feel empowered to ignore the law, Helmer told me. Your duty, if you're a Commonwealth attorney or a sheriff, is to enforce the law, and if you're not willing to do that, you should resign. But by the way, also in the back of their heads is, well, I'm a state or county official, and I'm going to defy the law, and Trump will appreciate that. And even though I will be charged with a state crime, presumably, I can still look forward to a pardon, just like Tina Peters, because Jared Polis is a goddamn idiot and has set the precedent for this. Now, it's not the case that Abigail Spanberger will have to do it because Jared Polis did it. That's not a real thing. I don't know what exactly they held over Jared Polis's head. It may still just be he's a goddamn idiot and thinks that that would solve a problem for him that it won't solve. I don't know what problem it is. Do they have something on him? Do they threaten to make something up about him? Is he just one of those guys who says, if I jump out of Trump's way, everything else will go fine? We know that Trump threatened a lot of other funding and other programs in Colorado, and he may think that threat goes away if he complies on Tina Peters. I don't know if that was the motivation. I don't know if that's motivation that would work on Abby Spanberger or not. They call her Abby. Does anybody call her Abby? Abigail Spanberger or not? I don't know. She's a totally different person. There's no way of telling. But certainly there are people who feel like Trump will be able to get it done for them if he wants to. And they might not be wrong. Helmer, to say a little bit more about this, also pointed to the state's recent history of high-profile gun killings. The largest mass murders in U.S. history, and also in Virginia history, have been committed either with assault weapons or high-capacity magazines or both. Helmer, who did tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, said, if future purchases go unprosecuted, he argued, it could lead to more mass killing in our communities, and we don't want that. Research suggests this is plausible, and efforts to act on assault-style weapons are aimed at curbing a whole range of violent crimes, not just mass shootings. Spanberger has yet to comment on the growing rebellion, but it creates an awkward situation for her. In coming weeks, she's expected to preside over a signing ceremony for the law. If nearly a dozen county prosecutors, and perhaps more by then, are simultaneously vowing not to enforce it, that seems to challenge her in a fairly brazen way. After all, Spanberger was elected statewide less than a year ago by a whopping 15-point margin, outperforming Kamala Harris's 2024 margin by 9 points. Though Spanberger lost virtually all the red counties that are now rebelling against her law, she outperformed Harris in just about all of them, making inroads in very tough political territory. In a sense, Virginia is experiencing something you might call the de-Southification. The state stretches from the growing, highly diverse, very populous suburbs in the north, which abut the urban area of Washington, D.C., down to diversifying Richmond in the southeast, even as its heavily rural southwestern tip reaches deep into Appalachia. Spanberger's stratospheric margins in the heavily populated northern suburbs, combined with her overperformances in deep red areas, suggest the state's MAGA and rural strongholds continue to shrink in clout, though the election of former Gops Governor Glenn Youngkin slowed this process, although that happened before she was... It didn't stop anything for Abigail Spanberger. I see what he's saying. It's been an ongoing trend for quite a while, but Glenn Youngkin, I guess you could argue, disrupted that trend. But actually, it's kind of been tradition in the modern era in Virginia anyway. Like, we flip-flop back and forth from Democratic and Republican governors, even as the state trended toward purple and then blue all along. You know, there have been other Republican governors in the last 20, 30 years. We flirt with them all the time. It happens in other states too. But all right, there's nothing wrong with that analysis, I guess. Those areas are resisting enforcement of the first assault-style weapons ban in the South neatly captures the bigger transitions underway. All right. It's notable that something similar is happening in North Carolina and even to some degree in Georgia. Oh, I have information about that. In North Carolina, the southern neighbor of Virginia, the eastern urbanized diverse areas are gaining in demographic clout over its rural areas, some of which also stretch deep into Appalachia. No question, North Carolina is well behind Virginia in this process, and Georgia is still extremely tough territory for Democrats, though they do hold 2 statewide Senate seats and are, making challenges every year in the governor's races. Not every year, of course, they only hold them every 4 years. But as Ron Brownstein details, the basic story connecting all these states and even to some degree Texas is that their combination of diversification and urbanization continues to nudge them in a Democratic direction. Trump's successes, his 2024 inroads with non-whites and blunting of Democratic margins in diverse populist strongholds, has led many to doubt that demographic change necessarily favors Democrats. But in some important respects, demographics do continue to help Democrats, though they're obviously insufficient on their own. Spanberger's overwhelming victory, the shrinking of MAGA clout in Virginia, and the rearguard resistance to enforcing her gun control law in deep red areas, amounting to a MAGA nullification movement of sorts, neatly capture all these deep tensions. The big outstanding question is, how will Spanberger navigate them? It is a good question. I have no answer yet for that one. We'll have to wait and see. All right. With just a little bit of time remaining here, I have two competing demands on my time. I'd really like to get to another one of these things, but I really feel like the context for it requires continuation with Steve Vladek's analysis of the Alabama case, summarily handled in a couple of pages in an unsigned and unreasoned opinion on the emergency docket, the shadow docket over at the Supreme Court. We read, let's see, I got to scroll down a bit to find where we left off, and I think, yes, all right, I think it was probably right about here where we left off. And maybe this last paragraph of the previous section helps set the tone here. We were discussing the dissent in the case, which I think went on for several pages, I think about 4 times as long as the supposed decision in the case. Justice Sotomayor, once again joined by Justices Kagan and Jackson, dissented, right? Specifically, she accused the majority of weaponization of Purcell. Remember, we were discussing the Purcell principle and whether it's even a principle anymore. She accused the majority of weaponizing Purcell, of allowing a state to make late, legally dubious changes, use those changes as the basis for getting out from under an earlier injunction that, like in the case of Purcell, was not too late under Purcell. That is to say, I know I screwed this one up here for us, but letting a state make late, legally dubious changes right before an election to get out from underneath an injunction that was permissible under Purcell, like lower courts imposed an injunction against the new map in Alabama in 2023. Like, presumably, an injunction in 2023 is not too close to the 2026 election to say, I'm sorry, we can't allow that injunction to hold. It's too close to the election that will be preceded by an earlier congressional election. It was before the 2024 elections. It's certainly before the 2026 elections. But can the state do it anyway? Sure. The order, she wrote, disregards both democratic values and the rule of law and would force officials to reassign hundreds of thousands of voters in just days at best, a task that Alabama previously represented would take months. Alabama itself tells you it can't be done. Now, this section is where the analysis starts to turn and become, I think, a little bit more important for us to take away and apply long-term both to this case and to others. Not necessarily analogous cases, that is to say, other voting rights cases, though it will certainly be used this way, but cases of all kinds, forever, in any context, so long as this majority prevails. The case for inconsistency is the name of the next section. Here is where I want to be careful, because the charge of inconsistency sometimes gets thrown around loosely, and the court is entitled to draw real distinctions, but the inconsistency here is not a matter of impression or mood. It is visible in the orders themselves. Start with the asymmetry between 2022 and 2026. In Merrill versus Milligan, the court in February of 2022 stayed a unanimous lower court ruling that Alabama's congressional map, the same damn one, likely violated Section 2, with Justice Kavanaugh's concurrence, joined by Justice Alito, invoking Purcell to keep an arguably unlawful map in place roughly 9 months before the election. I mean, this is the memory that you have, even if you don't remember that was Alabama per se. You probably had that in the back of your mind. But what we're talking about here is February of 2022, lower court says Alabama's congressional map is bullshit. No, it violates Section 2. You can't use it for the 2022 elections. This is in February of 2022, 9 months before the 2022 midterm elections. Lower court says this is violative of Section 2. Justices Kavanaugh and Alito, I guess, at that point say Purcell says no. It as violative of Section 2 as this map may be, it's 9 months, just a mere 9 months to the election. I'm sorry, you're going to have to conduct your 2022 elections with this violative map. Because Purcell, everybody knows, too close to an election. Wow. Now, the court did the same for Louisiana that cycle. And guess who's back to have it happen again? Both of those two states. At that time, Purcell counseled against judicial disruption of a state map, even one that lower courts had found unlawful, including in a holding the Supreme Court would later affirm. In 2026, by contrast, Purcell was deployed to permit a state's 11th hour switch to a map that a court had found intentionally discriminatory, requiring exactly the kind of large-scale administrative scramble the doctrine was meant to prevent. In the meantime, when Purcell should have counseled against Supreme Court interventions in Louisiana when it was asked to issue the judgment immediately, and Alabama when it was asked for a stay or GVR to GVR the judgment immediately, it was GVR of the May 2025 District Court ruling, the principle, quote-unquote principle, was nowhere to be found. Note what that means. In both directions and on opposite facts, the Republican-controlled state won, with Purcell applied in some contexts, but not in others. It's just outcome-based, is basically what he's saying here, without actually saying it. The Supreme Court's December 2025 intervention in the Texas redistricting case only sharpens the point. In Abbott versus League of United Latin American Citizens, the court stayed a 3-judge district court's injunction against a map found to be an illegal racial gerrymander, even though the injunction issued almost a year before the general election. A year. Justice Alito's concurrence invoked Purcell's vocabulary of confusion and an active primary campaign. If a year out is too close for a federal court to act in Texas, what's the argument for the Supreme Court's May 4th ruling issuing the judgment immediately in Calais, or its May 11th ruling issuing a GVR in the Alabama cases? In other words, the real sin here isn't what the court did on Tuesday night. It was what it did beforehand to help precipitate Tuesday's ruling. There's no universe in which the Alabama 3-judge district court's May 2025 ruling was too close to the election. Only the Supreme Court's only GVR, which certainly was itself too close, opened the door to Purcell at all, because it necessitated a new injunction from the same judges on the same questions. The point is not that any one of these orders is indefensible in isolation. It is that taken together, they cannot be reconciled by reference to a neutral administrable rule. They can't. The court has extended the eve of an election to nearly a year when staying relief sought by minority plaintiffs. And by the way, every time they say a year, I think of how long Merrick Garland was made to wait, such that he never got a confirmation vote or hearing to the Supreme Court, and whatever else you want to put in there, we replace him with a Republican. Though now, of course, everyone may have soured in the meantime on Merrick Garland, but the point is the same. Interesting. A year away. We can't have we can't confirm a Supreme Court justice a year ahead of the next election. Time has no meaning for these guys in any context. And I guess that's what I'm talking about here. You can apply. They'll end up applying this kind of reasoning to everything else. Well, the Purcell principle can go to hell. It won't even just be about time things necessarily. They'll just say, well, we had a principle, we didn't like the principle, so we got rid of the principles, just like we did with Purcell. Why we can get rid of any principle we don't like. That's what this will stand for. All right, where were we with this? The court has extended the eve of an election to nearly a year when staying relief sought by minority plaintiffs, yet found no Purcell obstacle to its own rulings wiping away lower court decisions and clearing the way for last-minute changes to congressional districts in Louisiana and Alabama. As Loyola's Justin Levitt put it in a studied understatement, the doctrine increasingly, quote, seems like it's really not a principle at all, unquote. And now, the appearance of politics. That's the part of the story that should worry even those who are otherwise comfortable with where the court has landed on the merits. A doctrine this malleable invites precisely the inference that the court can least afford to have drawn about it. Professor Wilfred Codrington's, wow, that's some name, study of pandemic-era applications found that in nearly every instance, Purcell operated to the benefit of one party and to depress turnout, producing the very confusion it purports to avoid. The current sequence reinforces that perception because each ruling has cleared the way for Republican-favored maps that eliminate black majority or majority black and likely Democratic districts across the South. The appearance problem is not cured by the order's silence. In both Calais and the May, Alabama order, the majority did not even mention Purcell. Of course, they would look like idiots if they had, leaving the reasoning to be supplied by dissenters and commentators. Even last Tuesday's per curiam opinion cites Purcell only elliptically, pointing to a 2020 ruling that itself cited Purcell. That's it. When the Chief Justice publicly laments that the public wrongly views the justices as political actors, orders that consistently favor one party in racially charged redistricting fights, and don't do anything to explain away the justices' substantively and procedurally inconsistent behavior, make that lament harder to credit. I want to take the strongest version of the other side seriously, because there is a principled defense, and it deserves a fair hearing. Purcell, on its own terms, restrains federal courts, not states. A state's decision to change its own rules in the late innings is a different matter for which the state bears political responsibility. And on that view, last Tuesday's Alabama ruling is not Purcell abandonment, but Purcell fidelity. The district court was the late acting federal actor, and lifting its injunction simply restored the state's prerogative. Notre Dame's Derek Muller has also suggested that Purcell is generally understood not to bar a court from lifting an injunction as opposed to imposing one. Although it seems to me, and the equity guru, Professor Sam Bray at Chicago, that equity is and ought to be reciprocal. That leaves us with Alabama's own framing, that no court should force a state to conduct elections under a map the Supreme Court's new precedent suggests is unlawful. That argument at least has some force in the abstract, even though you might say, oh, but they were wrong to hold it unlawful for the wrong reasons. But that's neither here nor there. The trouble is that the defense runs aground on the court's own 2022 conduct. The premise that a state should never be made to run an election under a legally suspect map is precisely what the court rejected in 2022 when Justices Kavanaugh and Alito specifically invoked Purcell to require Alabama and Louisiana to use maps in the 2022 election cycle that lower courts had found unlawful. So just for the record here, Alabama has had facially illegal and discriminatory maps in the 2022, 24, and now we'll have them again in the 2026 elections. And we can't fix it because every second of the day of every hour of every year is too close to an election, if necessary, if that's what you need to find in order to throw the thing out, or to hell with it, the state is doing what we want. It happened the day before the election, seems fine to me. But 1, 2, 3 congressional elections in a row. We're now in 2026. We're now eventually they're going to start saying, making them change this close to a census and redistricting is going to be disruptive of their process. Well, all right. We've come to the end of today's show, but let's read a little bit more and finish up the section here. Indeed, the court's 2022 interventions led directly to at least 3 other states using maps lower courts concluded were unlawful. netting Republicans as many as 5 seats in the 118th Congress, the exact margin, as it turns out, of the Republican majority in the House during that last Congress. Isn't that something? The court cannot coherently both hold that Purcell compels using unlawful maps in Alabama and Louisiana, as they did in 2022, and that Purcell isn't violated by intervening in the middle of primary voting, allowing Alabama and Louisiana to get out from under lawful maps in 2026. One of those sets of results can be defended, the other, but they both can't be, not both at the same time. And that, to me, is the bottom line. A rule that can license a result and its precise opposite, depending on which way the partisan valence runs, is not a principle of restraint at all. It is unstructured discretion wearing the costume of restraint, and the longer the court declines to explain itself, the more threadbare that costume becomes. And the more the Chief Justice's complaints about the court being perceived as political may be protesting just a wee bit too much. All right. That's got us to the end, way past the end. I probably should have played the music a little earlier, so apologies to Justice Putnam in delaying the start of the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. All right, that's actually the end of the relevant part of the Vladeck article. The thing I wanted to tip you off to and really wanted to read you more about, I think, plays off of part of what was hinted at in the Greg Sargent piece on nullification in certain corners of Virginia and the trending blue of the entirety of the state, and then mentioning North Carolina and Georgia along with it. We'll read it more thoroughly because it's important, but I want to get it on the note here. An opinion piece in the Washington Post from over the weekend that I found intriguing right from the start. Whose piece is it here? Theodore R. Johnson writing, "A great reverse migration is shifting the balance of power in the U.S. Republicans in southern states are gerrymandering the return of black voters." The Great Migration, we're thinking, of course, of the Great Migration out of the Jim Crow South to the North, where people could, in fact, find enforcement of voting rights. People are now, black people, returning to the South, and guess where the epicenter of those returns are? Georgia, North Carolina, and to some extent, Virginia. Interesting.
Radio.com.
The voting outcomes are changing there.
You're listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Voting outcomes changing there, so they're jumping out ahead of it in Alabama and Louisiana before it happens to them. An interesting angle on all this. We'll discuss it a little bit more tomorrow. Time now for Justice Putnam to take the wheel and bring you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next, right here on Netroots Radio. I'd preview what he's about to say, but he's about to say it. See you tomorrow.